Hello everyone, this is POW Ponder on Weather. In this update, we're going to be talking about some fierce winds with some severe weather, an Arctic blast, and a snowstorm over the next 7 to 10 days. So if you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button and notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. Good morning everyone, this is October 28th update, and what we're looking at here is the water vapor imagery on the North American view, so you can kind of get a full depiction of what's really happening currently. We see our atmospheric river out here off west that's still bringing in an ample supply of moisture into portions of Washington here, and that's why they've got flash flood watches in place today, along with that cold front that's left all the severe weather in its wake. And we got a lot of dry air on the backside that's going to bring some very windy conditions for much of the day today. Ahead of it, we've got that severe threat into portions of Florida and riding up portions of the East Coast here. And there's our powerful nor'easter that still leaves 300,000 people currently still without power here in portions of the Northeast, but that is safely finally moving away. So let's go over a look at the hazard index currently right now. There's our flash flood watches in portions of Washington today, with those training bands of atmospheric river and moisture still feeding parts of that area. But look at that. I mean, we look at all the high wind watches and wind advisories today for a good chunk of Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas, going into Louisiana, as well as portions of Mississippi and Alabama and even Georgia. And then we also have those coastal flood advisories in parts of southern New Jersey as well as Delaware for today. So let's take a look at the winds, because man, these things are going to be fierce winds coming out as the sun comes up. It's windy right now, but it's even going to intensify as we get throughout the day, as this rapidly low pressure here is going to be really deepening and going to be riding up the East Coast again. So, but on the backside, they've got some very fierce winds they're going to be dealing with in Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas, of those 40 upwards to 55 mile per hour winds at times. These are gusts. And then along the boundary here in portions of Louisiana, they start cranking up again as you get into Alabama and portions of Georgia here. But yeah, it's going to be a very windy day, to say the least. And then we also have some severe weather to talk about. It's been a very crazy active week, guys. I mean, this has just been an intense week. We've got Oklahoma now has added more tornadoes to their all-time total. Now they're at 31 tornadoes for Oklahoma for October. That breaks the all-time record of 27. We had a very severe tornado in Orange, Texas yesterday. We had a preliminary EF2 tornado in Lake Charles, Louisiana yesterday. And now that same system continues to move east, and now we're setting up over portions of Florida. So yeah, areas in along anywhere from Miami to Jacksonville to Tampa to St. Petersburg, going into Orlando, going into Tallahassee, Florida. You're going to be under the gun to start seeing those strong to severe thunderstorms, and that isolated tornado threat is not out of the question. As you've seen, this has produced numerous tornadoes within its path, and that's going to be up to along the coastal areas of getting into Savannah and to Charleston, going into Wilmington today. You're going to be under the gun into Raleigh. So all these areas, you have to be on the lookout for those strong to severe thunderstorms, and definitely an isolated tornado that may pop up in your region. So definitely be weather aware in that area. So as we move up and take a look at the overall U.S. look, we can definitely see that atmospheric river is continuing to pummel parts of the West Coast here. The main setup today is going to be far northern areas of Washington, where they've got those flash flood watches in place. But right along this boundary, here's that low pressure here really starting to get its act together. On the backside, you got all those windy conditions. To the north in the warm sector, you got all those scattered showers and thunderstorms. And then down to the south, you have that instability where it's going to bring that severe weather. So as we continue and go through tomorrow, October 29th timeframe, that same system continues to wrap up. Now we're talking flood watches come back again, and with some very heavy rain into portions of southern PA, getting into West Virginia here. as we got a lot more heavy rain on the table in your region as this continued to push up the coast. We're probably talking sporadic 1 to 2 inch rain amounts, but under these flash flood watches, anywhere from 3 to 5 inches is definitely not out of the question, as this will continue to bring sporadic rains into Washington and Oregon and to California, as we still have that training bands sets up over time. You know, some areas will be more unstable than others at times, but still, for the most part, this continues to be unstable for portions of the West Coast here. And then as we go through that October 30th timeframes on Saturday, that same low pressure will continue to push further off to the north. Now we're getting to places in New York City again, going into Boston. These are areas that got hit hard with that storm. They're going to be adding to your rain totals of a good solid probably 1 to 2 inches coming back in the picture for Saturday as this continues to push further off into the east. We can finally get rid of this storm by the time we end the month. But then we have to go transition and look at what's going to come out next. So then we take a look at the Southern Oscillation Index, and I use this index a lot to kind of gives us a key indicators on some potential pattern changes that are going to be might potentially on the table. We are currently in a weak La Nina pattern. We continue to remain in a weak La Nina, and we're expected to remain there all the way through early spring. But there are subtle indications where you start getting hints of some sort of like pattern change on the table. Typically when you have an SOI of a +8, that typically implies you're in a La Nina. If you have a -8, that's a El Nino. La Nina's drier, overall drier. El Nino's overall wetter. But there's subtle hints, because we start looking at the daily contributions here of these daily totals of a +28. That's well La Nina type, right? You have 21, 15, but then all of a sudden, by the time we got into October 23rd timeframe, it drastically drops to a -22. And then the next day is a -21. So when you see these drastic drops like that, those are subtle hints of pattern changes that are on the table looking ahead, because the Southern Oscillation Index is a lagging indicator, and it's about 10 to 14 days out. So what this tells me is we've got a lot of instability and definitely colder air on the table, rain and snow potentially 10 to 14 days out. And what would that put that in an overall track of right around that November 4th through that November 6th time frame? So let's take a look at the pattern going forward, or what that looks like. So let's take a look at the overall 500 millibar index on the North American view. You can definitely see over here, we've had all those well above average temperature anomalies in the Great Lakes and the Ohio Valley. This ridge over here was been well placed further south. That's finally going to start moving further off to the north as we see troughs come back down underneath. And what that's going to do, it's going to continue to amplify as we go into that November 4th time frame. So now the ridge rapidly moves out and allows the trough to sink underneath. And there you can almost see the subtle hints of where the storm setup is going to be taking shape into parts of Colorado, parts of New Mexico, getting into Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas. And all this colder air will continue to drain southward into portions of the southeast. Colder anomalies will come back for the Ohio Valley into the Great Lakes regions, and then eventually get up the East Coast. Because we take a look at November 5th time frame, again, it really continues to amplify. You continue to have that colder air drain further off down to the south. This really amps over in the Ohio Valley, bringing probably a chilly rain, and some of this is going to start setting up a transition into snow as we get it possibly into that November 6th time frame. So look at the setup by then. You have the ridge over the top, and then you got the storm track underneath with much cooler conditions filtering all the way down to the south. Cooler conditions all the way down to the southeast, much cooler into the Ohio Valley. And then that storm track would ride up potentially along into portions of the northeast. So let's take a look at what that looks like going forward as far as the temperature anomalies. As you start to see subtle hints, it starts to bring down colder air by the time we get to that November 3rd time frame. We start getting into that window of that 10 to 14 day lagging indicator, right? You start seeing the ridge over the top. It was well above below average temperatures in Alaska. The pattern flips. Now we're talking well above average temperatures in Alaska, above average temperatures in portions of the western Canada here, above average temperatures in parts of the west coast and the southwest, where they've been well below average for much of October, right? Now the pattern flips. Now we see in below average temperatures for much of the Ohio Valley, getting a pretty strong cold front filtering all the way down into Texas by the time we get in that November 3rd time frame. And then we go into that November 5th time frame. Continues to amplify over the top. We've got the ridge building over the top, trough setting up underneath, well below average temperature setting up, average highs like low 70s. We're talking possibly 20 degrees below that. Maybe highs in the 50s by the time we get into that November 5th time frame. This is a November air mass. It's not January, so it's still going to be 15 to 20 degrees below average temperatures at times. So if it happened in January, it's still the same cold front, but overall your temperature would be 15 to 20 degrees colder, right? But still, this is a pretty strong cold front for November standards, and it drains all the way down in portions of the deep south, and it gets all the way into Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, and Georgia. This is going to be, a cool shot of fall for sure standards. You're definitely going to feel this cold front, and that's on November the 5th time frame. And by the time we get into that November 6th, there's your active storm track, right? It brings all the cooler conditions well to the south. Even Florida gets into the action with those below average temperature anomalies. So so this is a good pattern change is going to be on the table, and that's going to start arriving as we get into that middle of the week next week, especially in that 4th, 5th, 6th time frame of that active storm track that I think that's going to be on the table. So, and then the Climate Prediction Center is already kind of hinting at this moving forward into their 6 to 10 day outlook right around that November 2nd, right around through the November 6th timeframe of those well below average temperature anomalies moving in for a good chunk of the country. And it moves well down to the south into Texas and all the way into portions of the southeast, getting into portions of the Ohio Valley, where the West Coast flips. And then you have California above average. Much of the West Coast is above average by then. And then that even deepens as we go into that, 8 to 14 day time frame. Well above average temperatures moves back into the West Coast and Southwest, and then those cooler anomalies continue to drain. So it's going to be a longer lasting cooler spell than what we've seen as of late. So once the colder air arrives, it remains around for an extended period of time. So let's take a look at the storm track potentially by the time we get in that November 3rd time frame, because it's starting to show and hints where it could be setting up in portions of Denver. And of course, this is 6 days out, right? So I just wanted to give you an idea of where the storm track could potentially be right around that November 4th, November 6th time frame, because you've got those chilly rains coming back for Oklahoma and to portions Texas and to Missouri and to Arkansas, with snow starting to break out in Colorado, but this time in portions of Denver where you really haven't seen snow so far this season. And that colder temperatures will continue to drain south. We've got a 1031 Arctic high pressure. That's some colder air, definitely funneling in all the way from the north. We've got subtle hints of snow trying to break out into portions of the Texas Panhandle, portions of New Mexico, as that active storm track would continue to pump well here. And this will kind of gives you an idea of where the storm track could be, because by the time we get up into the Northeast, it might be cold enough where you have that transition to snow. I'm not expecting this to be a coastal event in any stretch of the imagination. It's probably going to be a chilly rain along the I-95 corridor. But to the north, northern PA, northern New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, going into Maine, I do expect this active storm track to be transitioning to snow by then. And by the time we get into that November 6th time frame, that's a huge flip right there. Portions of Southeast Canada has been well above average temperatures, well above average for the Great Lakes, well above average for the portions of the Ohio Valley. And now we're talking snow in these portions of southern Canada here. So that's a definitely huge flip that's going to be on the table over the course of 7 to 10 days. And there's your precipitation, where the active storm track continues to remain in effect for much of the West Coast here into Washington and Oregon and northern California. These are additional totals over the next 10 days. So this kind of gives you an idea of where the storm track could be, starting to set up in portions of Colorado. A lot of this is going to form into possibly snow, but then it transitions into a chilly rain into Oklahoma and Texas and Arkansas, into Missouri, going into portions of Alabama, Mississippi and Alabama, Georgia, into Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, getting into the Carolinas, and then it really starts to ramp up, and some of this will transition into snow, but still heavier totals for rain. There's your preliminary storm track for the next 10 days. This kind of gives you an idea of where the snow could potentially fall. Yes, I'm starting to probably going to be hints of snow into the Texas Panhandle, your first snow of the season into Denver. Don't look at the actual totals right now, because this doesn't even start until 6 days out. But this just kind of gives you an idea of where the active storm track could be in this area of the country, where it could be cold enough to snow. And then once it rides up the East Coast, it's mainly going to be confined to our northern regions of the Northeast. And then all this down in the South would be a chilly rain moving in by the time we move that 4th, 5th, 6th time frame. So, hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video and definitely leave your comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.